The Ripper Crew, otherwise known as the Chicago Rippers, was a group of satanic cultists composed of serial killers, cannibals, rapists, and necrophilists. Robin Gecht was the leader of the group and enlisted 3 other associates to help him with the crimes: Edward Spreitzer and brothers Andrew and Thomas Kokorales. The cultists' first victim was 28-year-old Linda Sutton, a sex worker and mother of 2. They abducted Linda near Wrigley Field on May 23, 1981. The body was found 3 days later when police responded to the scene after someone called about a bad smell at a motel. Authorities initially believed that the smell was coming from a dead deer, but after searching the area, they found Linda's body in a field behind the motel. Her children were 9 and 1 years old at the time of her violent death. Linda had been brutally murdered. She had on a sweater but no pants. Her underwear was down around her thighs with $17 tucked into her socks. She had been handcuffed, stabbed, mutilated, and her left breast amputated. Her body's condition was so horrific, they only managed to identify her through dental records. Due to lack of evidence, Linda Sutton's case went cold. The Chicago Rippers laid low for a year until May 15, 1982, when they abducted Lorraine Lori Borowski. Lori was reporting to work at Elmhurst Real Estate Office, but she would never make it inside the building. As she approached the office, the 21-year-old was dragged into a van. Her high heels and keys would later be found scattered on the sidewalk outside her office. The crew then drove Lori to a nearby hotel where they brutally raped and killed her. Among the items in Lori's purse the day she died was a copy of her favorite poem, Hurt No Living Thing, by Christina Rossetti. Her body was discovered 5 months later in a cemetery in Clarendon Hills. She had been sexually mutilated similarly to the way Linda Sutton had. Detective Commander and hypnotist John Milner was assigned to Lori's case and made the decision to hypnotize several people who were around the area at the time of Lori's disappearance. One person recalled seeing a van in the parking lot, but because the detail was so vague, it did nothing to forward the investigation. Like Linda's case, Lori's went cold as well. Lori's mother said when her daughter went missing that she couldn't sleep. She even went as far as carrying around a white sheet with her everywhere she went, so she could cover her if she found her body. On May 29, 1982, 30-year-old Shuey Mack disappeared in Hanover Park. Shuey had gotten into an argument with her brother while they were driving home, resulting in Shuey exiting the vehicle. She was never seen alive again. Her body was found 4 months later in a field in South Barrington. Shuey's body was so badly decomposed, the only indications of how she was murdered were nicks on her bones that appeared to be knife marks. 2 weeks after the abduction of Shuey Mack, the Ripper Crew picked up Angel York, a 23-year-old sex worker. Although Angel survived the Chicago Ripper Crew, the horrendous acts that the group committed on her still linger. A red van stopped near Angel, who was walking the sidewalk. The men suddenly jumped out of the van and overpowered her, pulling her into it. They handcuffed her so she couldn't attempt an escape, and so it would be easier for them to repeatedly rape her. They then asked Angel to commit a sickening act on herself. The Ripper Crew wanted her to sever her own breast in exchange for mercy. She was shaking, but started to slice at her breast out of fear. By seeing this, Robin's sadistic mind went into a frenzy and grabbed Angel's hand before driving the knife deeper into her chest. He mutilated her breast and masturbated into the wound while she continued to bleed. Robin then put duct tape over her wound, and the crew pushed her out of the van and into a gutter. On August 28, 1982, Sandra Delaware's body was found on the North Branch of the Chicago River. She had been raped, stabbed, and strangled to death. Her left breast had been amputated like most of the other victims. Sandra's wrists were bound together behind her back with shoestrings, and her bra was knotted around her neck. Autopsy reports show that her body had been found only 6 hours after her death. The Ripper Crew's next victim was Rose Beck Davis. Rose was a marketing executive from Broadview. Her body was found on September 8, 1982, dead in an alley under a stairwell. She was found lying on her back with her sweater nearby that had been ripped off of her body. Rose's autopsy reported that she had been repeatedly stabbed, raped, and strangled with a black sock. Her face had been beaten in so badly by the gang, it was difficult to identify her. Rose's breasts had been cut and mutilated. It was very hard to track down the Ripper Crew and link them to these cases because forensic science wasn't advanced in the early 80s. Many of the victims had an unknown time of death. Due to the gaping holes in their chests, animals and insects would tear up the insides of their bodies, making it even more difficult for coroners. Even if authorities were able to gather semen from the victims, science had not advanced enough at that point to link it to the Chicago Rippers. It wasn't until October 6, 1982, that authorities got a critical lead in their investigation. An 18-year-old Northside woman was raped, sexually mutilated, and left for dead along some railroad tracks in Chicago's Humboldt Park. Luckily, the woman survived and was able to describe her attackers. However, the victim had been drugged and severely beaten, so she was only able to communicate to the police through signs and writing on a piece of paper. On October 20th, 1982, police stopped the driver of a reddish-orange Dodge van. This van matched the description of what the 18-year-old survivor gave just 2 weeks earlier. The driver, Edward Spreitzer, said the van wasn't his, but his boss's, Robin Gecht. Robin was a carpenter-electrician that once worked for the prolific serial killer John Wayne Gacy. The woman identified Robin as her attacker. However, the authorities didn't have Robin Gecht in their clutches like they thought. They had to release him on October 26 due to the lack of evidence connecting him to the series of crimes. However, after further investigating him, the police found that Robin had rented a hotel room with 3 other associates, each with adjoining rooms. The hotel manager remembered the crew specifically because they were party animals and would frequently bring women to their rooms. What shocked police further was the manager also mentioning that the crew had been some kind of cultists, perhaps devil worshippers. The hotel manager, Rip Van Winkle, also had brothers, Thomas and Andrew Kokorellis, as tenants. Luckily, the two left a forwarding address for their mail. 23-year-old Thomas was home, and when authorities questioned him about the series of murders, his answers were inconsistent. They took Thomas to the station for further questioning and a polygraph test. Police were able to crack Thomas after he failed the polygraph, which led him to confessing the awful details of what the Ripper crew really did. Thomas described the satanic chapel that Robin had created in his upstairs room. Their victims were taken there and brutally tortured with knives and ice picks, as well as viciously gang raped before finally being sacrificed to Satan. The satanic ritual the crew would initiate was horrendous for the victims. The crew would sever the woman's breast with thin wire and cut it into pieces. They would then take communion by eating the flesh. The remains of the severed breast was put into Robin's trophy box of murders. According to Thomas, he once counted 15 breasts inside the trophy box. After Thomas confirmed that they had murdered Lori Borowski by picking out a picture of her, police had heard enough to take down the entire crew. They picked up the 3 other cult members and threw them into jail under a $1 million bond. They acquired a search warrant for Robin's apartment and discovered the satanic chapel that lied within. They also found a rifle that matched the shooting of 28-year-old Rafael Torrado. Rafael and his friend were just standing at a phone booth in Chicago when he was fatally shot and his friend wounded. The shooting occurred on the same night that the 18-year-old survivor was attacked. Although it's speculated that the Chicago Rippers killed 18 victims total, exactly how many victims they had may never be known. Authorities were not able to locate all the victims' bodies, and apparently the crew was high and drunk at the time of the attacks, which led them to confusing the details. On April 2, 1984, Edward Spreitzer pled guilty to 4 counts of murder to the victims Rosebeck Davis, Sandra Delaware, Shuey Mack, and Rafael Torrado. Ed received life for each count and additional time for rape, deviant sexual assault, and attempted murder. On September 21, 1983, Robin Gecht stepped up to the witness stand and confessed to the attack on Beverly, Washington. He was convicted on all counts and received 120 years of imprisonment. He will be eligible for parole in 2042. In an interview, Robin was asked about his disturbing obsession with breast mutilation, and this is what he said. Well, in an answer to your question on obsession with breasts, it is a thing with my entire family going back, as I'm told, to my great-grandfather. He explained, each of us men have married large-breasted women. My ex-wife is a 39D, and yes, she was very satisfying to me. Later he told the interviewer that he had no real obsession with breasts in a sexual form, and that only a very sick person would even think that. This is contrary to what Edward Spreitzer claimed. He said that Robin once became so furious with his wife that he cut off her nipples. On May 18, 1984, Tom Kokorellis was convicted of Lorraine Lori Borowski's murder. Thomas, his brother Andrew Kokorellis, and Edward were convicted 18 days later for the murder of Linda Sutton. Andrew and Edward were also named in a second indictment covering the murder of Lori. Andrew Kokorellis was sentenced to death and was executed by lethal injection on March 17, 1999. He would be the last inmate to be executed in Illinois. Edward Spreitzer was also sentenced to death, but Illinois Governor George Ryan commuted all death sentences in 2003. After serving just half of his 70-year prison term, Thomas Kokorellis is getting a chance to rejoin society. Psychologists claim that Thomas isn't sexually violent, but a follower with a low IQ who unwittingly inserted himself into the police investigation while trying to help his brother. He was released in March of 2019 and as of June 2019 resides in Aurora, Illinois.